I want to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm A.B. Stoddard. I'm a columnist and associate editor at The Hill newspaper. And on behalf of The Hill, we are thrilled to be here hosting our first policy summit in Columbus, Ohio. The Hill is Washington's premier congressional paper and online resource. That is no joke. And we're here to cover what we've come to believe is a very important story here in Ohio, and of course, an important story nationwide as well. Ohio voters resoundingly believe that shale energy drilling will bring new jobs to Ohio, according to a Quinnipiac poll from January. When asked in the same poll whether the economic value of shale drilling outweighs the environmental concerns, 64% responded yes. That said, the environmental impact of hydrofracturing does weigh on their minds, and 43% says it will damage the environment. 16% disagreed with that, and 40% were unsure. We have gathered a robust group of energy policy and economic experts today to share their perspectives on the potential economic benefits of shale energy production. We'll hear from the leadership of the Ohio House and Senate, a member of the Ohio delegation, experts from academia, industry, and other advocacy organizations, CEOs of energy companies, and of course, Governor Kasich from the great state of Ohio. I want to welcome you all and also welcome our online audience joining us today via live stream. Please turn your attention to today's Twitter hashtag, Energy Jobs Summit. That would be @ right? Whether you're in the room or watching from your computer, please feel free to tweet questions. We are looking for them and looking forward to them and your comments as well. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, the Coalition for American Jobs, and its members, the American Petroleum Institute, the American Iron and Steel Institute, the American Chemistry Council, and their Ohio affiliates as well. And with that, I'm going to introduce our panel of state elected officials and ask them to come up to the stool of their choice, though I am supposed to be on the far left one. Ohio's Senate President Tom Niehaus has represented the 14th Senate District of Ohio since 2005, and in January of 2011, his colleagues unanimously elected him to serve as the president of the Ohio Senate for the 129th General Assembly. How are you? Good. Ohio House Speaker Bill Batchelder returned to the Ohio House of Representatives in 2007, having previously served in the Ohio House for 30 years. He's currently serving his third consecutive term and was elected by his colleagues to serve as House Speaker during the 129th General Assembly. We are expecting State Senator Lou Gentile, who will be, okay, terrific, who is serving in his first term in the Ohio Senate, representing southeastern Ohio in the 30th Senate District. Prior to his appointment to the Senate, Senator Gentile served in the Ohio House of Representatives. Hi, good morning. State Representative Dave Hall is currently serving his second term in the Ohio House of Representatives. He represents the 97th House District and is chairman of the Ohio House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. And I'm going to invite them to speak to us. We're going to hear from them, and in which order, I don't know. Or perhaps we can kick off in this direction back. Is that okay with you? Okay. All right. Okay.
No, I think he wants to do an opening statement. Is that it? And then open it up for questions?
You're well. We've given you each several minutes to make some opening remarks, and then we're going to get to questions.
Great. Would you like me to kick off?
Yeah.
It's good to be here this morning. Welcome to all of you. I'm State Senator Lou Gentile from Steubenville, and I'm pleased to be part of the panel today. I want to highlight that I am the only Democrat on this panel. But I'm happy to do that.
We'll be hearing
today.
a lot from you.
But I'm pleased to have that opportunity. Thank you all today for being here, for giving me this opportunity. For many years now, Southeast Ohio has struggled economically, and we see this opportunity for us, particularly, as a chance to revive our economy. All the while, I think it's critical that we do this properly, that we protect our environment, that we create local jobs for our local communities, for our small businesses, and spur our economy. And so I'm looking forward to working with many of the companies that have demonstrated an interest in our region. We went literally from some of the slowest years in recent memory to a sudden surge of economic activity. And although it hasn't kicked in fully, we expect and anticipate within the next 5 years substantial growth. And we're trying to partner with some of our educational institutions to make sure our workforce is trained and prepared to handle this. Certainly infrastructure is a concern with roads, with water, with bridges. And so I've tried to be an advocate on behalf of local governments and communities and workers to make sure that we're able to do this, do it responsibly, and to have a positive economic benefit from it. So I think a balanced approach is the best approach, and it's one that I've taken very seriously and have tried to be committed to making sure that communities in my region are able to benefit from this, and also to maintain some of the wealth that's generated. We've got a sudden increase in millionaires in Southeast Ohio, and so we want to make sure we properly manage that wealth and that money stays in our community and works for the people in the communities and for our workers and for our young people so they can begin to stay and have a future in Southeast Ohio. So thank you. It's good to be here, and I look forward to having an exchange, a productive exchange this morning.
Well, I'm Senator Tom Niehaus. I'm honored to be President of the Senate, and I represent an area down along the Ohio River just east of Cincinnati. One of my great disappointments when I saw the map for the shale oil play is that my property was not part of it. But I have had the opportunity both in the House and the Senate to work on oil and gas related issues in my almost 12 years in the legislature, starting in the House when I was on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee and on the Public Utilities Committee, then in the Senate when I chaired the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and now working closely with the administration and the industry trying to work through the issues in the energy MBR that we are considering. And it is really an exciting time in Ohio when you think of how the energy landscape has changed in just a few short years. I mean, from the fact where we were building LNG terminals to import natural gas, we're now retrofitting and converting them to export natural gas. The exciting potential that exists for the industries that need this energy resource, whether it's chemicals or manufacturing, and the potential that exists for the renaissance of manufacturing, not just in eastern Ohio in Lou's area, but throughout Ohio. When you look at the ripple effect in all of the companies that are benefiting from, whether it's production of pipe or pumps, equipment, that exists throughout the state of Ohio. So while the focus is on eastern Ohio and certainly the most dramatic changes are occurring in eastern Ohio, all of us in Ohio are benefiting from the potential resurgence of manufacturing and the resources that exist in the eastern part of the state. I firmly believe, having spent as much time as I did on the natural resources side and on the energy side, that we can responsibly develop oil and gas resources in Ohio and protect the environment. They are not mutually exclusive opportunities. And I know my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle are just as committed to doing this in a balanced way. Lou has been a good partner as we work through this process because jobs are not a partisan issue. We want people to work. And when people are working, they feel better about themselves, the economy does better, we all benefit from that. So we want to be partners with you in making sure that we do responsibly develop these resources. One of the areas where you can be very helpful, and the governor has mentioned this with other industries, you need to forecast. We need to know the types of employees that you are looking for, so that, as Lou mentioned, we're working with the schools to make sure the curriculums are in place so that you have graduates from Ohio. I support the governor's initiative that we want these employees to come from Ohio. We welcome people who want to make Ohio their home, but we would frankly prefer to have Ohio residents be the ones being trained to assume these new jobs that are going to be available over the coming decades. And these are generational jobs. These are jobs that they will be able to work with and pass down with their families if we do this the right way. But you need to be a partner with us and help us understand the types of qualifications you're looking for. What are the skills that you need to fill the openings that you're going to see in the coming years. So to the extent that you can do that, we can then work with the education community to make sure that, no pun intended, that the pipeline of qualified help is there when you're ready to develop those resources. So appreciate the opportunity to be here today and look forward to a Q&A afterwards.
I'm State Representative Dave Hall. I am Chairman of the Ohio Ag and Natural Resources Committee in the Ohio House. The gentleman to my right appointed me the position, and my job is to make sure the Speaker looks good in that process as Chairman.
That's a tall order.
There you go.
That's a lot of work.
Well, having the opportunity, I have a unique process in the General Assembly, being the only member that I have 16 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, from the all the way down from the lowest job all the way through the process. So as chairman of the committee, no one's going to fool me, and they're going to, the questions are going to be asked if someone's out there with misinformation, or I can ask good questions. I have a great committee who is very involved, and we've gone all the way till 2:30 in the morning on some of these issues. But in the same process of having 16 years of oil and gas experience, I also was a Parks and Recreation Director after my career in the oil and gas industry. So I have the process in the environmental side, understanding what we need to do to protect our greatest resource. And the process we've done in Ohio, we do protect that resource, water. But having both that process, but also the other hat, and I'm not that old, but I have carried a few hats in my life, wearing a few hats. And the other hat was being a president of a local development district in eastern Ohio, in Appalachia. So we were able to have that process of networking basically in the crosshairs of the early process of the industry. And I've had the opportunity, I've spoke to 153 town hall meetings in the last 12 months amongst out in Ohio, talking to Ohioans, talking to different businesses, to trade unions, to organizations throughout Ohio. And being from eastern Ohio, I finally see that sparkle back in the eyes of people in eastern Ohio, and the hope and the opportunities. And Senator Gentile said it right, we've got to make sure these people stay in Ohio. I consider this called the Beverly Hillbillies Jed Clampett process. The problem with what we had was that Jed Clampett was able to get those oil revenues, and he took off to California. Our job is make sure that we keep them in there, so they're the individuals who are going to spur the next wave of industry. They can reinvest and be entrepreneurs in eastern Ohio in this shale play. So that's something we have to be, our challenges is to get them to stay in Ohio and reinvest in Ohio. You're starting to see that in the early process in eastern Ohio. But in the process, I look at this. We have challenges. We look at this and from knowing the industry as well as I do, you have challenges. There's two things can stop this. Number one, wells do not come up to production in the well process, the drilling process, and we have light production. The second one's government. And you have something where government can get in the way of a process. We're in competition with other states, with other shale plays in the United States. There's only so many rigs in North America that are drilling. And our process is to make sure that we have the opportunity to get these rigs into Ohio. We have a disadvantage of our infrastructure on the pipeline and some of the compressors, but I know we have companies coming in to take care of that. So in the competition mode, we have to make sure that we're out there making sure government's not in the way, but still requiring them to do it our way. And that's the governor's MBR that's sitting in the Senate. Looking forward to having that in my lap here in the future, so I can go through the process in committee. But there are a lot of challenges, but having all those hats, it can be done. We've been doing it. It's just a matter now of getting these people into Ohio and start the production process. So looking forward to some of these numbers we're going to see in the near future within the Utica shale play. You know, everyone, we got to remember, we separate the Marcellus and the Utica. Everyone's looking at the Utica in this process, and we really, truly need some good numbers where we're at. Some of these wells, there's some test wells being done farther western part of the, going to Richland, Ashland County area, some of the center of the state of Ohio. I just want to see where those wells, how they come in, and see where we're at in this major play. Because remember, history, and I'm a history buff, Mr. Rockefeller started it all in Ohio a long time ago in the process. We're no strangers to the industry. It's just a matter now, we need to make sure that we get them here and get the process moving. So thank you for your time.
It's good to be with you today, and obviously we're looking for assistance in the area of expertise as to what Ohio should be doing. We have a lot of options. Some of them are, I'm sure, very good. Some of them we better watch out for, and therefore Ohio is really focused on what you can do to help us to do the job that we want to do for the people of this state. And you're right, I was not here when Rockefeller, sometimes people get confused. I started in 1968, and it's some of them think that I've been here a long time, and I don't regard it that way. But Rockefeller started over in the western side of the state, and of course, the rest is history. Obviously, he had his training in Cleveland. He became a bookkeeper, and that seemed to be the way to run an oil business back then. A remarkable man, obviously, and the work that he did over in that area still has fruit after all these years. Marathon Oil headquarters are in one of the counties where he was drilling. I think it's important for us to learn from you so that we don't make mistakes. Unfortunately, businesses like this one can be killed off by government in a hurry. I'm not quite sure what they're doing down in Washington right now. Congressman Johnson just came in. Maybe he'll help me out. But we, this morning, had a ADP result of 119,000 new jobs. That's way below what it ought to be. And if we don't, I am just scared to death of what's going to happen at the end of this year when the Bush tax cuts are on the block. That's a source of capital. That's a source of people feeling good about investing in America when they're overseas. There are a lot of people in Spain who don't want to keep investing there, for example, or Greece. And so we want to make sure that we have predictability long term so that we have the kind of economic superstructure that we're going to need here to do the right thing. I think the members who have mentioned our situation with regard to the infrastructure are right on the money. We've had a tough time in the eastern part of the state at building the kinds of things that they need to get product out of there. And so this gives us an opportunity to do that, but in partnership. If you're our partners, then we know what is required for you, and we know as well what is required for those local areas. The unemployment there over the years has been very high. It was an area that at one time had a great deal going on. And unfortunately, for some reason, a lot of people in Washington don't think coal is a good generator of power and so forth. And obviously that particular industry's had a hard time over there. But we're looking forward to the debate that's going to occur. I think this year ought to give us a pretty good chance of communicating to the people of the state of Ohio what could happen if we get it right. And it's important. You gave us some amazing statistics there in terms of people's confidence. But the other thing that I think is extremely important for us to keep in mind is how much manufacturing ability this state has. And I see a friend of mine over here, Tim Timken, of the Timken Roller Bearing Company, which makes the best steel in the world. And we're going to be looking forward to what he may be able to do to be supportive and helpful. We just have a lot of outstanding talent and capacity in this state to do things that are crucial in going forward with this. The governor pranked us, what, about a month ago? He sent us a 2,700-page bill, which was, it wasn't funny. And I want my people back on the hustings. And we're working hard at it. We're doing our best. Obviously, that is tying people up, literally. I mean, We have, the mayor of Cleveland came up with a brand-new proposal for how to improve urban schools. He's a very devoted man on that program. It's a tough issue. All this stuff's in front of us at once. And for those of us who remember Confucius, it's really tough to live in interesting times. So we hope that we can rise to the occasion, and we know that you can help us to do that.
Okay, I'm going to ask a few questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. The Ohio State government has been given a lot of credit for engaging not only with industry to learn more how to smooth the path for this, but with environmentalists as well to try to safeguard the public health. There were a total of 100, if I am correct, new natural gas permits approved in 2011 in Ohio, and at the current rate this year, the number of new permits in 2012 is expected to surpass that. And as the state races to adapt and write a new framework for rules, how is the state's oversight and regulation keeping pace with the speed of current shale energy development? And I'm going to let whoever wants to answer. Of course, Lou will want to take some time on that.
I think it's important for us to understand that we have a domestic industry which has been outstanding. They came to us 3 years ago with legislation that worked in this particular area, environmental protection. So the industry brought us the bill. They wanted to be certain that before any of this was really widely known, they wanted to be certain that they were going to be doing a good job for the citizens of Ohio. And the Ohio Oil and Gas Association has been a leader in actually protecting the environment. And that kind of effort has put us in a good position to go forward in those areas. The governor's very interested in these things. We've had a lot of excitement this year in a number of areas. For example, we had a group of, I call them erotic animals. That bill's in your committee, right?
Today.
A whole bunch of animals broke out on a farm, and so now we're having to work on legislation. I'm not kidding. Having to do with bears and lions and tigers and all kinds of snakes. And this is going to be probably one of the most interesting sessions I've been in, and that takes in a lot of sessions. But I just want to make clear that the oil and coal industry in this state are very, very much a blessing to us because of their attitude.
I wanted to echo some of the speakers' comments. I had the privilege of authoring the last two pieces of oil and gas legislation, House Bill 278 and then most recently Senate Bill 165. And in both instances, the way I operate is I bring all parties to the table. And so we had obviously the oil and gas industry there, we had the administration there, but we had the environmental community there. And I think through that process, we heard the concerns, we addressed many of those concerns, but I give most of the credit to the industry for stepping up and saying, listen, we know some things are going to be changing. I'd like to say that we anticipated the shale oil play when we passed 165. If I had known that, I would have been buying property in eastern Ohio. So we didn't anticipate it, but we knew there were some things happening and there was some potential. And it was very important that the industry, to the industry, one, that we had the right regulatory framework in place. They wanted to make sure we had enough inspectors so that when they were ready to drill, that they weren't being unnecessarily delayed because we did not have enough people in the field to inspect their rigs and keep the process going. So they were very forthright in one, advocating for raising their fees so that we did have the resources to pay for those inspectors, making sure we had the regulatory oversight, making sure that we had the environmental concerns considered. Because at the end of the day, as I tell my friends in the environmental community, no one wakes up and says, what can I do to ruin the environment today? I mean, from a purely selfish standpoint, if you never cared about the environment, you don't want the liability that comes with making a mistake. You don't want the public relations disaster that comes with making a mistake. So I have a fundamental belief that industry is always going to try to do the right thing, if only for their own selfish interest, to make sure that they're protecting their shareholders, they're protecting their assets. And so what we did was engage all the parties in the conversation, and I think at the time we were told we had one of the more robust regulatory programs in the country. I do think now as we look at what's going to ramp up, unfortunately with the price of natural gas, we're not seeing as fast a ramp up as we had anticipated, but clearly as these rigs get in the field and we find out, as Dave mentioned, what are the resources, what are the potential revenues from these wells, we are going to ramp up very quickly, and we are going to have to figure out how do we make sure that we're able to also provide the regulatory framework that oversees that. It will be a challenge, and frankly, that's part of the tension right now between the industry and the administration in terms of how many people do we need in the field, when do we need them, what's it going to cost, who's going to pay for it. So that's all part of the energy MBR debate we're in right now.
And the President mentioned that debate, and that's taking place, and actually I just left committee to be here today, something that's being discussed now. A couple of the things that have popped up in the MBR, and there's still quite a bit of debate around those issues. One is the disclosure of the chemicals that's being debated right now in committee, certainly. And then another issue that has arisen that we need to just make sure that we're properly overseeing is the disposal of wastewater. And so there's going to be, I believe, in this MBR, fee increases for a lot. We're getting a lot of out-of-state brine that's coming into the state of Ohio. So that's an issue that we have to carefully monitor, I think. And I get a lot of questions from people in the community about that. And those are important issues that have to be addressed. We just need to make sure that as this industry does ramp up, that our Department of Natural Resources is in a good position to properly handle this additional investment that's coming here and more activity.
If I can just follow up on that quickly, under the new disclosure requirements, will companies have the authority to withhold information that they deem proprietary about the chemicals that they use?
Well, we are still discussing that, but I
Okay.
think the short answer is we believe yes, that there is a model already out there. I think Colorado has a model that has been agreed to by the industry and the environmental community that right now I believe is the strictest in the nation, and these keep evolving, but we are very mindful of the fact that there are proprietary chemicals, trade secrets that are protected by long-standing law, and it's our intent to honor those legal precedents.
I have one last question about the boom. Shale development is expected to produce nearly 70,000 jobs or more in the next few years here. And in looking at what happened in Pennsylvania, in the areas that are expected to flourish from new development, are there plans underway to ensure in these communities and municipalities that will face increased pressure and demand that there are adequate social services, infrastructure, equipment, that the roadways are prepared as well? Is there anything that you're doing at this early stage?
I'd like to get into that. Being a former county commissioner myself, and going out to a lot of the stakeholder meetings early on and discussing with county engineers. County engineers are been on board early on, and working with the administration. We've started that about 6 months to a year ago. Discuss what the infrastructure needed to be. Have called a road use maintenance agreement, just on the infrastructure. Well aware of what needs to be done. Signed off by the commissioners and the trustees and the county engineer. We've been working on that level there, meeting with a human service side of expecting the issue you may have that other states have, and I've traveled to other states, using the housing issue. I mean, you're always going to be dealing with, in another state, maybe like in North Dakota, there wasn't much housing available. But we do have a lot of available housing early on in Eastern Ohio that we've lost a lot of people in the state of Ohio, and we'd like to fill those houses again. So I mean, that is, I don't see as a major concern early on in the process. There's something called home builders. People want to build some things in Ohio. That will help spur the economy. I think as you're seeing and talking to local governments right now, and some of my former fellow commissioners through Eastern Ohio, they're actually seeing their income, their sales tax revenues is just leap right now, and you're seeing that early process of dollars going into local government early on, and they're seeing those spikes in numbers, and they like it. And so, but I would like to get back to that one question about where we're at with the oil and gas, and what are we doing in environmental and everything else. got to remember, technology's changing every day. And remember, back in the day when they first did a wealth stimulus, they used to drop a nitroglycerin down the hole and run. We've come a long way, but we're always going to need to be upgrading our code with the next best technology. So we're always mindful of seeing what's out there and working with, and something needs to be brought up, what we're working with, and what is a great process is called Jobs Ohio. Jobs Ohio and David Mustine and many members out there are already working in the front lines, networking, and our greatest challenge is getting this company married to this company. So I see some opportunities there, but in the infrastructure, Ohio was able to see what was coming on the infrastructure, on the issue of human services. I think we're ready on that process.
And on that point on human services, I think Dave hit a good point, and that is just the activity today with the existing tax structure is generating new revenues. We are a local control state, which means we expect the local communities to step up and use those resources to provide the services that they feel they need in their community. And what Dave's home community may use it for could be different than what my home community uses it for. But the revenues are there to address those issues, and I think there was, because of the proactive efforts of the industry, there is an awareness of the local communities that they need to look at these issues. We are looking at our neighbors, learning from what they went through so that we don't have to experience some of the same problems that they did. But it will be a challenge. On the road use maintenance agreements, again, one of the reasons that process is working so well is that those of you in the industry have to improve the roads to move your equipment to get them to the potential well sites. Well, guess what? You're probably going to build them to better standards than what the county engineer would build them to. And so by partnering with those local communities, you're benefiting because you're getting access to the resources. The community's benefiting because they're getting a better road. And by working through these RUMA agreements, it's proven to be very beneficial, and we'll see over the long term how that plays out, but the early indications are very positive.
I'm proud of the folks in Jefferson County who actually really led the effort, I believe, to make sure that this road use maintenance agreement, or the RUMA, was included or is being negotiated between the industry and local governments. We saw a contingent led by a lot of the leaders in my former House district who started to really push on that to make sure that happens. And now there's language in the MBR that would facilitate that conversation. I think it's critical, though, that the state make sure that that gets done and that we get a fair agreement that will be helpful to local governments and also provide the industry with the ability to continue to grow.
It's my job to keep us on clock, so I want to just see if we have any quick questions from the audience for the gentleman.
Oh, I forgot mine.
No? Yes? Oh, here we go. I think we have a microphone. She has a microphone for you. What time is it?
22.
Hello, I'm Bob Suver. I'm Director of Job and Family Services of Clark County. So I'm interested in the jobs part. But also, I have a farm, and I farm in Clark County. And they're in the process of just starting to drill a well in Clark County, which is not part of the Eastern Ohio shale situation. But I just wanted to pass along that apparently you're doing something right, because the company from Michigan said that they were really surprised by the approval process and that they expected weeks and weeks of waiting on the approval for the permit, and they actually received it in 3 weeks. And they said it was very efficient and very well done, and so they were very, if you're looking at that comment about other states and drilling here, apparently you've ramped up to a degree that the companies are feeling that you're working as a partner.
Any other hands?
Thanks. Good morning. I'm Ben Gieman, reporter with the Hill newspaper. I wanted to ask, you've walked us through what some of the legislative process and regulatory process is going to be. At the same time, there's several studies that are ongoing right now. The federal EPA is doing a multi-year study of the potential health effects of fracking, and the National Academies Institute of Medicine has also decided that they want to take a look at this. Given the speed at which this is going to be ramping up, is it appropriate to have this development be speeding along so quickly at a time when you've got not just EPA, but other people still figuring out what the health effects of this are going to be?
Well,
Where
let me
have they
take the
been?
let me take the first crack at that and say, yes, it is appropriate. We have been fracking in Ohio for at least 30 years, around the country maybe longer than that. I can't speak for that.
That's right.
I'm not aware of any issues in the state of Ohio in all the years that we've been fracking. And I think it is good that we're doing the studies. We need a scientific-based approach. We don't need a hysteria-based approach. And what I see are a lot of people trying to scare the hell out of people with misinformation because they don't have the facts. So let's do a scientific-based study. Again, I'll go back to my original point. I don't think anybody in industry gets up in the morning and says, what can we do to mess up the environment today? But we're using technologies that have been proven over decades of use. We continue to improve those procedures as technology changes. So I absolutely support the continued use of fracking as a means of developing these natural resources because we've shown we can do it safely and responsibly.
If that proof is so manifestly clear, do you think that these studies are even necessary then? I mean, clearly the people at the Institute of Medicine feel like this does deserve a look, as do the people at EPA.
I think people are going to conduct studies whether we think they're worthwhile or not. So let the scientists take a look at it, but let's base it on the facts. Let's not base it on some hysterical notion or some preconceived notion, because as you all know, whether it's in a court case where you need to hire an expert witness or if it's a study where you want to get a certain result, I can go out and hire somebody to get the result I want if I pay them the right amount of money. So let's just make sure that whatever we're doing is based on scientific fact, not on anecdotal evidence and not on anomalies.
It's somewhat ironic that that would occur now. North Dakota's been going for a long time, and as the senator pointed out, here in Ohio, when we had the last oil boom, about World War I era, they were very definitely engaged in these activities. I mean, you know, the government can do two things. They can encourage and they can help people to have the proper tools to do the job, or they can run in and turn on a fire hose and stop progress right in its tracks. This was going on in New York State, it was going on in Pennsylvania, it was going on in Michigan. So I kind of wonder where they were when these other things were going on.
Can I comment?
Yes.
I think, I mean, first and foremost, health and safety of the populace is critical.
Sure.
And protecting our water supply is also very important. And we hear those concerns. I hear those concerns, and I believe they're valid concerns. However, some of my colleagues, called for a moratorium. I don't believe that's necessary. We don't have any evidence to suggest that's necessary. I think we really need to, at this point, make sure that we're developing this resource appropriately, responsibly, and that we're partnering with industry, with the environmental community. And there are those of us that believe that all those concerns that have been raised are valid and should be looked into, and these studies should be conducted. And I think we ought to look into what they produce, but I don't think at this time it would be appropriate to call for an all-out moratorium just to wait upon these studies. We've got a lot at stake, a lot of economic growth and development and job creation in a part of the state that really has struggled for decades. So I hear those concerns. I think they're valid. I think we need to explore them. However, I don't think we should halt responsible development.
I have one last question for the speaker. Obviously, the appeal of shale resource development is clear, but Ohio is a sizable coal-producing state. And how are these numbers of the estimated, generated jobs, et cetera, impacted by any resulting job losses in that sector?
There's no doubt that there's competition between these two very fine industries, no question about that. I think that the coal industry in this state, which has been very responsible and responsive to local needs over the years, I think they probably have a lot bigger problem in Washington, D.C., where they seem to take the view that coal is bad The EPA has done a lot of things that are hurting our ability to generate electricity for some of the best manufacturing companies in the world, and I think that's more of a problem. The subterranean issue is a very interesting one. It's been in the Supreme Court a couple of times. We have term limits in Ohio, so I got to go be a judge for a while. The Supreme Court has examined the question, and if you drill and you go through a coal mine, bad things could happen. And that's something that I think is part of the competitive issue. The two industries are responsible, and I think they will work those things out. But you would very definitely have identified, Ohio has a 500-year coal supply underneath it. And so that's also an issue that we want to address in a constructive way.
All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you. And we're going to move me back to the podium so I can introduce our next speaker, and you are going to go back to your tables.